have Albert Dueibas. He's the president and CEO of Nuvive, a company focused on innovation and technology development and how to help address climate change through the agri-food supply chain. He will be speaking on the decarbonization and diversification of the sugar beet industry and how we could create energy from the sugar from beets. So please welcome Albert Dueibas.
Thank you all for having me here today. Prospectively, what I'm here to do is to share at least with you some good news. That's kind of what development does, and especially in the field of science and technology, is to look at a problem and try to figure out a solution. And from that perspective, when we looked at renewable energy resources, as far as we talked about today about solar energy and talked about other aspects of EV and all those kind of things that are part of the whole picture. And obviously, we are left with the primary focus that we have, which is decarbonization of our energy infrastructures. That comes in from fossil fuel. Just to give you that entry note on that, and that's kind of what my focus on my project works on, in looking at other resources to develop sustainable renewable energy that we can really develop in an economical way, and it can be used in a diverse way, so we can really meet that gap. The gap of leaning off traditional fossil fuel. And for that, that's been done in the past, through the past 20 years and in different parts of the world. And that focus was started early, about 20 years ago in Brazil, when they looked at their sugarcane production and how they diversify that into ethanol production, where the country right now, it's pretty much utilizing most of the infrastructures using renewable energy, ethanol, for their energy production. From that perspective, let me jump in today's, and we look at that aspect of it for us here in the U.S. and share a story with you. The story is that, historically, how we came about to have a sugar beet into our infrastructures as far as food supply chain. And traditionally, sugar cane obviously started, be traded in the world in an organized way in the 1500s, and we don't want to touch on that, but there's a little of a dark history that goes with that. And but in the 1800s, we, due to the fact that there is a need to diversify that supply chain, sugar beet was introduced in the mix, and from that perspective, started in Europe and then eventually moved to the U.S. and pretty much a successful operation. It kind of took hold in the late 1800s, like 1890 in the U.S., and where we're planting and cultivating sugar beet for sugar production. And after that, we had World War I, World War II, and food security became an issue. So there is more magnification in that process of production of sugar beets in the U.S. And right now, the sugar beets, our production is been optimizing to a level where, the yield from early 1900 today is pretty much triple. And so we have very efficient resources to cultivate and grow sugar beets today. So right now in the U.S., sugar beet is at most efficient yield production, agriculture, industrialization that we have. It's been growing higher and higher and better. And obviously all that comes in at a cost. The cost of that is industrialization and the use of more fertilization, the use of more aggressiveness on the land and the water resources, and as it gets more and more, it could really be detrimental. However, there is options out there, but part of the reasons that happens is because over the past 50 years, we concentrated sugar production in certain areas of the country. And that has to have with a temperate climate that has a little bit cold weather, so it helps with storage. And so we were not able to really open new areas for cultivation and growing sugar beets. And in the contrary, it just gets smaller and smaller, which is that's within 50 to 100 miles of a processing plant. And these processing plants became so genomic and so much environmental pollutions. If anybody comes in from the Bay Area knows that that smell could be, you could know it from miles away, let's put it that way. And even though they put more effort to clean that up, it's still an issue that has to be dealt with. So from that perspective, as coming to sugar beet current processing, it has a limit and it has a disadvantage, and also it has opportunities as well. So, and that's what it comes down to, is what is the opportunity in really taking our current sugar beet infrastructure and turn it to a source for us to really use it as a source for renewable energy. So the first thing that we want to do first, obviously, look at it from a perspective of decarbonizations, in the sense of saying we're trying to lower the impact on the environment. Currently, sugar beets in an optimal way, or optimistic way, I could say, there is between 35 to 40% of the harvest is wasted throughout the supply chain. So that's pretty much a big number. And there was the reason for these efficiencies that I was talking about that took place. It was to mitigate that standard of waste that was in there. So the waste was high, therefore they have to improve efficiencies, and the best improvement of efficiencies was for them is to improve the yield. Therefore, they can mitigate the risk of the waste with the increase in yield to make the economic works. I mean, we have it in some times that they would leave the harvest in the field because it's not even worth picking it up at that point, either because it did not have the right yield, or as far as yield per acre, or sugar content within it. And that's also a problem, and that's also a waste as well. And so what I worked on is really looking at the process of cultivating that waste and using it as a source for our renewable energy. So now you say, how is it renewable energy? Well, let me kind of give you quick numbers in that sense to tell you is that as far as that concerned, when we're talking about sugar beet, the conversion rate for sugar into ethanol is 2 to 1, meaning that for every 2 pounds of sugar, we can make 1 pound of ethanol. If we look at crude oil, is pretty much in line in the same kind of ratio. So pretty much we can grow our own energy. And current technology and current genetic breeding for sugar beet is even improved further. However, there is a fine line where you can make sugar beet for food production and sugar beet for energy production. And that's a distinctioning factor that we have to look at and kind of evaluate. The good news is that we can grow our own energy. And that is a wonderful thing to think about. And I think the reason why it's good, wonderful news, because we all know about circular economy and climate economy, where the farm becomes this, instead of we're farming, for just food, we can farm for energy as well. Or farms could really be sustainable in the sense that they could use solar energy, like we talked about earlier, and now they can also use crops like sugar in the rotational crop to really create renewable energy from that in the form of digestees, biodigester for renewable gas. That from that we can generate electricity. and also as well that from the production of ethanol, which is that could either be used directly into hybrid engines, or it could be used as full engines. And there is technology right now to use ethanol as a full source for machineries and automotive and all this thing as far as engine when they design it in a closed loop way. So circling back to the point now, we have an opportunity to really look at the current infrastructure that we have and what we need to do and how we can do it. So if we have this conversation with industry specialists or farmers or people that are in the sugar beet industry, they can ask questions how, where, and where. So how we can do that and where, that's two easy questions. The most important question is, do we need to do that or not? And the question that they look at it from an economical point of view, 3 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, the question I always got, no, there is no need. We're in the sugar business. We don't want to do that. But now with market and demand and ability to use government support, we are able to really activate opportunities for that particular way of looking at sugar beets as a source for renewable energy. So how we can do that and where, that's an easy question, like I said, but it required for us to really look at it differently and looking at what we can do. So let me kind of give you a perspective of how sugar beet is being grown, cultivated, and processed. Sugar beet is cultivated in the field, in open field, obviously, just like corn or anything else as a rotational crop. And we have it in the Bay Area here, the Thumb area. And even though I think like 50 years ago, it used to grow all the way in Indiana and all these other areas around us, but because of efficiencies, like I said earlier, and investment in these mega processing plant only control us to really have in certain areas. So sugar beets get processed, and it takes between 3 to 4 months to kind of grow into a process that it's ready for a harvest. And there comes in the issue. We have a short period of time to harvest that crop before the winter sets in, where the ground is frozen, okay? And after or before the rain, gets a chance to really light up and that. So there's a short period of time to really cultivate, to harvest all the sugar beet. So all the sugar beets get harvested and get stored in what's called pile up, or from that area you could see that it just gets piled up into areas where either waiting for it to be transported to the processing station. So each of these pieces of steps that get touched, there is a waste factor that goes into it. The moment a sugar beet's out of the ground, the moment the sugar beet thinks it's have no access to energy and start using its own sugar. So you'll lose its yield. The beet is not there making sugar for us. The beet is making sugar for itself to store it as an energy when it needs it. So when it's dark, it starts using it as an energy. When the sun is up and the leaves start collecting the sun rays, they're making more sugar until either the cold comes in, or the sunlight goes away, and that's what it uses it for. So when we cultivate it and pile it up and store it, so the sugar beet starts using its own energy. So it's a race for us to take that sugar beet and bring it into the processing plant. But the process plant cannot really work that fast to process all these things together very quickly. So it takes between 180 days to 160 days to really process the whole season. And each day that sugar beet is sitting in the field, it's losing value because it's using its own sugar, like I said. That's one way of looking at it. It's called respiration, and where the sugar is using its own energy. But that's not so much is where most of the waste happen. Most of the waste happen in the process of handling it. A beet is like an apple. If you're taking a bite of an apple and you put it on the table, the moment you do it, oxidation starts taking place and you see the apple start getting brown. Same thing with a beet. The moment you handle it and it gets nicked with the implement or with anything that comes into it, it just gets injured, and that injury is turning into fungus, and obviously there are other microbial infections that set in there, and then it loses more value into it. And by the time it gets to the processing plant with this turn, they end up cutting that piece that it's not really good, and so you end up losing volume from that, and from that perspective, you're losing yield and you're losing opportunity. So my thought process is to really look at that waste and how can we really aggregate that waste and collect it. The best way to collect that waste and stop it from happening is to stop the cultivation waste in the field by taking sugar beets itself and immediately drying it into a powder, whereby we're preserving the value of the beet throughout the process chains that could be moved and stored and processed a later time at even a later location. So that's the first part of the equation that we're doing. It is now to stopping that sugar beet from really losing its value through the process going through. The second thing is that how can we increase the cultivation of sugar beet? The only way to do it is to open new areas of cultivation. And currently, based on the infrastructure that we have, we cannot, because you have to live within a geographical area with processes. But if we change the way we look at sugar beet and how we preserve its value by preserving its value in the field into a powder, we can really grow it in higher areas. We can grow it all the way up in the UP. It can grow all the way also up in a warmer climate, where we have a chance when we grow in a warmer climate that we can really not only have one harvest, we can have two harvests, and which is by itself is accomplishment as well. So now we're solving the two problems. One problem is preserving its value. Two is increasing the volume of cultivation to meet demand. And from that perspective, people come into it and look at it from sugar beet being food item, obviously, and food security is an important element, and making sure that we are not really taking sugar beet out of the food supply so we don't harm the food security. And based on those kind of things is that the best way to look at it is really we're looking at augmenting what the current infrastructure is by expanding the areas of cultivation and also preserving the waste that currently being have. There's more detail if you're industry experts, we can go into it, but for the purpose of this conversation is to share with you the good news of that we have an opportunity to really look at sugar beet as a source for renewable energy that could be integrated in our current agriculture infrastructure and can be capitalized for that aspect of it. So from that perspective, what we heard today is that kind of brought in, like I said, a piece of good news, and where we can use that renewable energy in multiple ways. So from that perspective, we can use it to make production for ethanol. We can use it also as a biodigester to create also renewable gas, which is by itself, in conjunction with what we talked about earlier, solar energy, could be used as the impetant or the starter point of energy in the process. Therefore, the processing sugar beet could reach to net zero, meaning that we're not using any extra energy. We're using energy within infrastructure itself to produce it to do that. And the most other bigger problem that it could be solving for, which is, we all heard about it, that sustainable aviation fuel. And I think I was sharing earlier a slide that I was looking at. Out of every barrel of oil that we use to produce gasoline, oil, and all those kind of things, only 4 to 5 gallons of that are used for jet fuel. So you can imagine that, it's not a big percentage. But if we use ethanol to produce jet fuel, we can use it in a ratio of 3 to 2. For every 3 gallons of ethanol, we can make 2 gallons of jet fuels. And like I said earlier, from that point of view of sugar conversion to ethanol, for every 2 parts sugar, we can make 1 part ethanol. So you can see that the numbers work as far as, when you compare it with the infrastructure that we need. But the most important element is that to convince that we are in a new revolution of really thinking of a new way that we look at renewable energy resources. Part of that is the sugar beet, and that's also in line with the basic fundamentals of the crude oil industry that they're using, because you can take the same 1 barrel, break it down to different things, and we can take the same thing that 1 acre of sugar beets and how much we can produce, and when we can break it out to all constituent things. And also we also can use the fiber component aspect from the sugar beet to be either fermented to 100% renewable gas, or at least a closer border to it. Also, we can talk about it, use it, like the gentleman was earlier, talk about using it as a compound in renewable materials as far as packaging and bioplastic. So it's the same kind of mindset, a barrel of oil, a bag of sugar, with the same kind of continuum that we look at as far as percentage of all those kind of things, and looking at it. And now size and scale, we can make it happen. And also we can make it happen from a point of view economical, because we've grown it in multiple areas, and we can bring economy of that. And being the fact that it's a rotational crop, and that also have its own benefit that we can talk about it in some other times, but it all fit in together. So, and it's just worth looking at it and understanding it, and just keeping it in the dialogue that we're talking about when we're talking about renewable energy and feedstock. And I'm hoping that's kind of, like I said earlier, to share that with you as a good news, as a good possibility, and doing my part. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.